Hello, and thank you for coming to my presentation titled Positive Outcomes from Online Learning. My name is Carlos Budding, and I am a teacher in Akita International University. The agenda for my presentation is basically tell you a little bit about what the purpose of my presentation is, talk to you about my university, and then the rest of it is tell you the system that we had for autonomous learning at our university, and what happened as a result of implementing a new system after COVID, and what came out of that. And I really want to focus most of my presentation about what were some of the positive things that came out of this, and then talk about what we hope to do in the future. The purpose of this presentation is basically to give you a narrative of what happened before we implemented the system for collecting information, and then after, and then what will happen after that. So it's not going to be heavy on literature review. It's basically just saying we had to make a quick decision, this is what we did, hey, and this is what came out of that. Before I get into those details, let me tell you a little bit about Akita International University. We are a liberal arts university where all our classes are taught in English. The students who come into our university already have a very high level of English, around a 530 TOEFL. We have strict attendance rules, we have a lot of homework that we give our students, and our third-year students have to study abroad for 1 year. So we have a lot of relationships with schools around the world. For every student we send, we have a student from that university come. So our third-year population is abroad, and we replace it with international students. So about 25% of our students are international students. It's a very competitive school to get in, and our students, I would also have to say, are very motivated. We have a self-access center, which is called the LDIC, which stands for Language Development and Intercultural Studies Center. I don't know why we call it the LDIC. We should call it the LDISC, but we don't. But moving forward, as you can see by the photographs, it's a very colorful, a very inviting place. And we have our students, mainly the students who use the LDIC are EAP students who are completing LDIC time, which is 50 to 60 hours of in-house independent work, and foreign students learning a foreign language. Those tend to be the students who use the LDIC the most. So let me just talk about what EAP, our first year students, do. Prior to COVID, or BC, before COVID, students had to use the LDIC, physically have to be inside the LDIC to accumulate time, between 50 to 60 hours of independent learning. If the students did not complete their 50 to 60 hours, they could fail the EAP and have to repeat all of their classes. Again, I wanted to emphasize that students had to use the LDIC, and the way they do this was using their ID card. They walk in, they swipe their card on this attendance machine, they use the LDIC, and then when they're ready to leave, they swipe it. And during that time that they swiped in and swiped out is how we accounted for what students did. But that was it. So, prior to COVID, the students had to use the LDIC. What they did in the LDIC, we didn't have any data. We just knew the students came in, swiped their card, and left. That was before. But then came COVID. And we suddenly found ourselves in a situation where, like, what are we going to do? If students cannot physically come to the university and they cannot physically use the LDIC, what kind of system can we have for making students accountable for that time? And so the idea we proposed was students had to work 5 hours a week and then via email submit to me what they did. And we gave them a video explaining how to do it. And we asked students to, keep their responses, their reports to about 50 to 60 words. Now, two things. Number one, for every email I received, I responded to that email by saying things like, hey, good job, or wow, this sounds interesting. Try to give a lot of positive feedback. Our EAP population was about 175, so every week I received 175 emails to which I responded to each student. Again, the purpose was, okay, do some work, let us know what you're doing, and we'll just give you some feedback. And by implementing this system, we suddenly had a new way of, we had a lot of data coming our way. Every student, every week, writing about what they're doing. And it actually turned out pretty interesting. The negative was it took a lot of time, that's for sure. But the positive is, wow, we suddenly now have data about what students are doing during that time. So, aside from the collecting of information throughout the semester, I also conducted a couple of end of semester surveys. One end of semester survey and a couple of focus groups where I asked students about, hey, what did you think about the program? How could we make it better? And so what I'll talk to you now are what are some of the positive outcomes that came from the semester, the survey, and also anecdotal and also focus groups. So one of the things that came out was, students understood the purpose of LDIC time. Prior to that, students just knew they had to go to the LDIC, do some work, but what work they had to do, how they did it, there was no monitoring of that. Just students used the program. But now I have some positive numbers here that say students knew, okay, this is why we're doing LDIC time. Did they know that they could use LDIC for personal growth and not just homework? Yes, most of them knew that. They all received positive feedback. However, you can see by the numbers at the bottom that most students did homework rather than more independent, autonomous learning. So I want to address that later, doing more homework. But some other data that came out was not only during the survey, but also during the focus groups, was getting to know what other people are doing. As you can see, like out of almost 130 people, 60 more or less said, we want to know what other people are doing. What is this student doing might be beneficial to me. Some of the students felt their speaking skills improved. They all felt the feedback was helpful, and it helped with time management. Now, when I looked over the responses, there were other subgroups. These were just the top 4. So let me just focus a little bit about what were some of the examples of autonomous learning, independent learning, things that maybe resulted, came from homework, but were developed into something else. And I've got 6 examples that I will quickly talk to you about. Magazine layout summary information. Here's a student who the homework was watch a TED Talk. But what she did was, the way she liked to learn was, she did a TED Talk, and she did by synthesizing the information in a magazine layout. It was amazing. she would send me weekly, I watched 5 TED Talks and this is what I did. And she would create some pretty interesting, what I would call like magazine layouts. She's not your traditional learner, and but I thought, students want to know what other students are doing. Here's an example of showing other students this is a way that you could learn. Because students couldn't leave their house, especially at the beginning, one of my students decided to become a bodybuilder while he was stuck at home. And he not only was working out for his body, but he decided to use some of that time to learn, the names of the muscles, the anatomy in English. And then one more thing he decided that he had to learn was, hey, teachers are expecting me to do PowerPoint presentations. I've never done one. And so let me practice doing things that I like, bodybuilding, in PowerPoint presentations and learn English at the same time. Here's 2 other examples. One of my students, in order to improve his writing skills and also speaking skills, he decided to do little videos of different countries of the world. If you're familiar with Sheldon Cooper's Fun with Flags, it's something similar like this. He just would, write a script for a 2 to 3 minute video about a particular country and do it. And according to him, he did like 80 or so videos like that. Nobody watched them. He just did it for himself. Another example assignment that turned into something bigger was, this student started researching a little bit about orphanages, and eventually it took her into working in an orphanage over the summer to becoming an English tutor. It's something that she became passionate about, and by teaching other people English, she was improving her English as well. And here are 2 final examples. Here's a student who independently just wanted to prepare herself for the UN test because she wants to work in the UN in the future. And she started, studying and preparing herself that way. And then one of my favorite ones is another student who was just kind of at her house. And she decided to learn how to cook things that are not Japanese. And so what she does is she researches topics or recipes from around the world, tries to mimic them, and then writes the Japanese version. And now she's taking cooking classes, or she's been taking cooking classes near her house, and has become quite the accomplished little chef. So, as I said, during the semester I got a lot of data of students, what they were doing, and I was able to kind of see like, wow, they're doing some really cool things. From the feedback, from the focus groups, what can I do? How can we move forward? And so I prepared a presentation for the university with some suggestions for the future. Number 1 being, let's open up the LDIC and realize that it's not only EAP students who use it. This is important for other reasons, but not so much for this presentation. So number 2, we need to teach students the importance of independent lifelong learning, because I don't think we're really doing that very well. Especially before, when students were just given the assignment, go use the LDIC, but outside of that, not really. As a whole group, there might have been teachers individually who teach it, but for the most part, as a whole, students weren't getting this message of the importance of independent learning. We also need to share examples of what other students are doing in order to promote this idea of independent lifelong learning, teach students how to do it. And then number 5, which is what I'm really focused about, is creating some kind of system to allow these people who are doing these things a format, an avenue, a stage to tell the world, this is what I did and this is what I learned. So for example, my student who was doing cooking, is to do something akin of a TED Talk to the university, saying, hey, this is the things that I learned independently. And maybe that would serve as a motivator for other students. In conclusion, I just want to say, again, this was a narrative of what happened before. We didn't have really any data. And then because of COVID and because of the system we implemented, we were suddenly flooded with data. And hopefully moving forward, we'll be able to change how it is that we approach independent and autonomous learning in the future for our students. So again, my name is Carlos Budding. I hope you enjoyed my presentation, and here's my contact information if you have any more details or questions that you'd like for me to answer. Thank you very much.